Welcome to Mandibil, and welcome back to my deconstruction series on Keith Frankish's lecture series on illusionism. And this time we are, I think, in part number 18, or is it 19? I'm not sure. Never mind, doesn't matter if I repeat the number here, actually, right? So we were sort of 36 and a half minutes into lecture 3, the case for illusionism, and I have to step out of a slide to stay within the 1 hour mark. And let's see if we can get further down the line here. It is a very, I have to state that, I don't have to, but I'm going to state that I find it tedious work, this, right? But I want to get through it because I want to get a full understanding of the arguments entailed in this kind of philosophy, or the lack of them maybe, right? Which is also an important aspect. But he's also very boring. There's no enthusiasm, apparently, right? He's like the boring, gray, droning professor that's just a part of the, part of the furniture, so to say, right? These are everywhere in academia. They drag the life spirit out of you, right? Now I'm being a little hard on him, maybe, right? But when you're doing a thing like this, right, and you're not showing passion, I am very much for passion. I like when people show their passion for stuff, and I might not like what they're passionate about, but I can like that they're passionate about it, right? And it helps me understand if you're sort of droning through 6 hours, there's no aspect that seems to be important to you, right? It's like everything is equally important or unimportant, right? It's just a series of statements I've made here, so I'm just droning through it, right? It's tedious work. And also, so far, I have no respect for what he's trying to do, right? And the way he does it. I've commented so many things I find to be of lacking quality and missing quality, and there's so much that is dislikable about this. I'm hard pressed to find anything positive to say about it, other than the basic fact that he's attempting to describe a weird kind of philosophy to me, right? Very weird to me. And potentially dangerous also, right? But maybe because it's so disconnected from anything, people are going to say, yeah, well, whatever, right? And carry on with their life as they used to, right? So they're not going to be inflicted by it in any way, right? But it's sort of it's a long, windy work, this, and I hope I won't end up sort of being too bored about it, right? I'm still finding stuff here and there, but it's hard for me to understand why he needs so much time for this, right? Apparently it's sort of a matter of degree, right? Rather than having one clincher argument that presents, this is what I understand, or a few of them, right? Rather than just compounding various cherry-picked stuff into these. There's so many points now, right? I must be right. Okay? So many things I have cherry-picked, right? That doesn't work for me, right? The more you pile upon it, the more I get confused and suspicious that you don't know what you're doing. You're just throwing shit at me in order for me to give up, right? Okay, let's dive in.
Very simple answer is the phenomenal properties don't exist, so there's no problem of fitting them in. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's look at another way of trying to fit in phenomenal properties into this physical picture of the world, which doesn't treat them as add-ons. And this is one that's become quite...
I might mention Oh my God, he's using the same picture again. That I've tried to figure out how to create a presentation on my side here, where the frames don't sort of low frame rate presentation of his, right? When I look at it on YouTube, it's sort of 30 pictures a second or whatever, right? Or 60 maybe. But it gets jittery on my side, and that's not optimal in my opinion. But I haven't figured out, I've sort of closed down all the, background stuff on my laptop here, right? And I like to do this on my laptop because I like to sit in my sofa and be comfortable and so on, right? I would prefer not to sit in my office and on the big screen, right? And I'm not even sure that would help. But this kind of software I'm using is also for Mac, and my stationary stuff is PC, right? And I really like my Mac, right? So I'm comfortable with it, right? So I have tried to figure out a way to optimize it, but I'm not been successful. So I guess you'll have to stay with this sort of jittery presentation of mine, and just a side note, right?
Popular recently, and it's this, it's that phenomenality, the phenomenal properties form another level in the physical picture. They're not outside it, they're part of it. They're actually another level, right at the bottom there. So the idea is that the basic physical entities themselves, the quarks or whatever the basic physical entities posited by science are, that they are themselves realized in phenomenal properties, in sort of micro-consciousnesses. The idea is that all science tells us about these basic physical entities is how they interact with each other, what effects they have on each other. It doesn't tell us what they are in themselves. What is a quark itself? What's it actually made of, as it were? And so the suggestion is, well, maybe they're made of phenomenality. Maybe their intrinsic nature is phenomenal. They are little micro-consciousnesses. Not consciousnesses having all the sort of rich variety of experiences that we have, but having just a tiny, tiny sliver of that. And then the idea that our complex human consciousnesses and the consciousnesses of other animals are...
But isn't panpsychist a case against illusionism? If you're talking about panpsychists, no, I'm not expert on that field, right? I've also find that a half-ass attempt at saving materialism from the heart problem, right? But why are you talking about? Would you fucking mind getting to the point, to the case? It's like you're trying to say, this doesn't work, this doesn't work over here, right? That doesn't work over there. So I must be right? Mm-hmm. So it's indirect proof, apparently, he's going for. Trying to say that all the others trying to, like Churchill saying, well, democracy is a bad system, except all the other ones that are worse, right? Something like, I'm paraphrasing, right? So maybe my system is shitty, but all the others don't work, so you have to accept mine, right? Sounds like, why? Get rid of all this fluff, right? Present your own argument and screw the others, right? Present it as clearly and concisely as you can to make sure that people understand what you're saying, right? Don't throw all this library of alternatives at me, right? I don't care about them, right?
Built up from these micro-consciousnesses, just in the way that our brains are built up, from the basic physical entities that those micro-consciousnesses constitute. So our brain is a construction of quarks, and our consciousness is a construction, or whatever the basic entities are, and our consciousness is a construction.
When you talk about your brain, right, you have to experience brain in order to have any idea of brain, right? And if your mind is inside a brain, how can you experience brain from the outside, right? And if you experience a brain from the outside, it must be somebody else's brain, right? Or at least only a small slither of your own brain, so you avoid destroying your brain, which I would suppose would be the end of things, right? For you at least. So you're saying, okay, inside that brain I'm looking at, I'm a operating table, right? Inside that brain there is the mind of this person, right? So if the mind is always inside the brain, and it's only mind that can have the experiences you are having, even your panpsychist ideas or your structure level, what's it called, reduction structure there, right? That must also be a part of your brain, right? Something, maybe not your brain, but a part of what is going on in the brain, right? So all these descriptions, however you turn it around, they're all also always only in the brain, within the confinement of the brain. So if you're saying you are telling me about stuff outside the brain, right? What reference do you have to that which is outside, that which is actually having the experiences, right? You can't have experiences outside your brain. And if you're saying you can have experiences outside your brain and you don't need those experiences inside your brain, or at least some of them, there's something wrong with you, right? You are having experiences outside your brain. That doesn't work, right? I'm not accepting that in any way, right? In this inside-outside dichotomy, right? So what you have access to are experiences within your brain, which you can classify as being something outside. But when you're classifying it this way, you have to accept that those things you're experiencing are not the things themselves, because those experiences are not out there. They are in there, right? And you do not have access to that outside because it's not an experience, right? You get it? No, I don't think so.
Of the micro consciousnesses of quarks or whatever. So now that finds a place for phenomenality.
All that which he's describing there is all an attempt to describe that lower level, right? All these things he's describing is inside that lower level. It's all in there. He's just arranging in the way that he finds fancy, or he fancies, right? But they're all a part of that experience down there. You can't extract them out of the experience and say, they are outside my experience. That's fallacious. You can't do that, right? You're living in the clouds. You're living in your abstractions. And all of a sudden claiming they are outside my experience. How crazy, man, right? Oh.
In the physical picture, and it doesn't have all this consequence of all these ad hoc laws linking the phenomenal into the physical world. So it's quite an elegant picture, and it gives, arguably at least, it gives phenomenality consciousness a causal role, because now all physical causation is phenomenality is involved in all physical causation. Everything that happens in the physical world is actually being caused by phenomenal properties right at the bottom level. It does face many problems, and especially what's called the combination problem. How do you get all these very, very simple micro consciousnesses to combine to form a human consciousness, a complex human consciousness? We have a sort of picture of how how atoms and how quarks combine to form.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's called the combination problem, but it's not a problem of how does it combine, but at what point does it become something like my experience? If it's sort of a micro, minuscule, mind, right? That at some point coalesces into a bigger mind and a bigger mind and a bigger mind, and all of a sudden, pop, there it is, right? But it's sort of this emergent consciousness out of mind that isn't conscious or something like that, right? Otherwise, the sun is the biggest mind in our solar system, right? That sounds crazy because it's the biggest mass there is, right? So it's just a failed attempt at hand waving the heart problem away, right? Not going down and look at the basics, right? The inherent paradox in the materialist thinking, right? So it's the because of this unwarranted extraction of your concepts out of, or your abstracting concepts, let's say, right, out of your mind down here, that creates a problem, right? You're looking in your atlas, right? No. It's like you're looking in the world, right? And then you're creating an atlas, and then you're looking at the atlas and say, how the hell does that become Germany, right? And that's stupid, man, right? So I can't explain how this atlas becomes Germany. That's stupid because you need the Germany in order to create the atlas, right? So this, as Bernardo Castro rightly points out, they're taking the territory out of the map, or attempting to, right? They created the map out of the territory, and now they're trying to explain the territory from the map. That's stupid, man, right? That's the problem. That's why there is a heart problem. It's because there's something wrong in the thinking, right? In the general mantra within this metaphysics, it doesn't work this way, right? That's why when you have bad metaphysics, it will eventually run into some very hard problems, right? Also the problem of other minds, which you should be able to experience other people's minds, right? Why not if you can experience everything else outside yourself? Why can't you experience their minds, right? Or their consciousness, or their whatever it is that's going on there, right? Why can't you experience that? What is so hard about that? Well, it's because you are not there. Your experience isn't there. Your experience is not in contact with it. It might have a representation of it in the mind, but that's not the mind, right? That's your representation of it. So the heart problem can be stated, but it can't be answered because you do not have access to the answer, right? So leave it the fuck alone.
From atoms and atoms to molecules and molecules and so on and so forth, and how this builds up from the structural side. But how do we do it from the...
Actually, basically, Keith Frankish here has spent 20 years of somebody else's money on trying to answer a question that can't be answered, right? You see how futile and fruitless and ridiculous academia is, right? It's like, let me find a question that can't be answered and let me spend the rest of my life trying to answer it, and go to lectures and go to TED Talks and whatever, making lectures on YouTube for Moscow Consciousness Center and so on. And, just making people even more, antipathetic, what's it called? Towards academia. They're saying, what the hell are they doing, right? And giving philosophy a bad name, in my opinion, right? That's all the result there is from this.
The phenomenal side. And there are many problems with that. And there are other problems too with this view. And also equally many ingenious solutions have been proposed to these problems, and it's an ongoing area of investigation. It might actually be perhaps the neatest form of phenomenal realism. It does have a certain sort of elegance to it. I do, however, think that it's theoretically costly. For one thing, it involves detaching consciousness from psychology. It's natural to think that consciousness is connected with perception, with perceiving the world and experiencing our environment and our own bodies. Well, this view detaches phenomenality, consciousness, from psychology. Electrons and quarks and basic physical entities don't have any psychological states. They don't perceive things, I assume. They don't have any sense organs or anything like that. And it also, of course, massively extends the range of things that have consciousness. We pre-theoretically, I suppose, we think that we are conscious. Many other animals are conscious, and that's it. Well, on this view, there's a sense in which everything is conscious. There's every particle, every physical particle.
Well, both Keith Frankish and his Philip Goff friend, who's a panpsychist apparently, and with whom he has a podcast on YouTube, a podcast series. What's it called? A channel? It's called Mind something. I don't know. I don't remember. But they're both in this camp of, well, if we can't either explain or get rid of the hard problem, right? It has huge ramifications for the ideas of science and so on, right? And we don't like that, right? We need the science. So we're going to come up with whatever we can to try to fix this, right? Rather than see, there might be actually a problem with materialism, right? You can rule that out. There might be a problem there. There's a lot of things that point in a direction that there might be something fundamental that is, right? It's like that rocket builder I spoke of in the last part, where it's sort of, okay, and though that fuel over there, yeah, but I've never heard of fuel in rockets, or I don't like fuel in rockets, so I'm not going to use the fuel for flying the rocket, whatever, something like that. It's like, just because you don't like there to be fuel in rockets doesn't mean that you can come up with some explanation of how to fly a rocket without fuel, right? So it's rather than grabbing your own tits and say there might be some problem with my foundational scientific approach to things, so there's some metaphysical stuff I need to handle, right? That creates a better kind of thinking that explains these particular aspects and why they are either explained or can't be explained or something like that, just like I did before in reference to the hard problem, right? And then they come up with 6 hours of cases, pro and con illusionism or something like that, just to refute or hand wave away the hard problem, right? It's pathetic, man.
In the universe is conscious. It may not be that these micro-consciousnesses sum up to form a higher level consciousness in anything other than humans and animals. I mean, the suggestion isn't that the micro-consciousnesses in a rock combine to form a rock consciousness. Though that would be a matter for theorizing on a panpsychist view. But it's certainly theoretically costly in that it involves supposing that consciousness is, in a sense, everywhere. And perhaps the major problem is that it's completely untestable. Because if everything were realized in consciousness in this way, it wouldn't make any difference to anything, to any observations that we might make. Because the idea is that the higher levels all continue exactly.
No, that's right. That's also a good criticism and panpsychism. It doesn't, whatever explanation they can come up with is not something you can check. And that's possibly why they like panpsychism, because they can go and fabulate all they want about something nobody can check, right? And you should be alerted about this. You can't check it, right? Because it's beyond your checking abilities, right? Because you only have a mind or a consciousness or whatever term you want to put on it when it's sufficiently combined into being something that is like the human mind, right? And at that point, you will be able to do panpsychism. But then it's too late. It has been combined. You can't turn the clock the other way or the path the other way and find what happens before it becomes, because it needs to have been combined in order to be panpsychism, right? So you can't get beyond, you can't turn the direction the other way and look, and you can fabulate with your concepts all you want, but they will be pure fabulation anyway, right? So it will never go anywhere. Panpsychism is just, cloud castles, right?
As they would do without that.
And another thing is, who the fuck cares how it combines You can't do anything about it anyway. You can't decombine it, right? Who cares how it combines, right? It's only because they want to have some kind of elaborate hand-waving to get rid of the hard problem that they are coming up with all this stupid shit, right? Instead of grabbing their own tits and say there might be something wrong with my metaphysics, right?
Without that fundamental realization in consciousness, the basic physical processes would all continue in exactly the same way as would all the higher level processes that they realize. Everything would go on just the same, whether or not it were realized in consciousness at the basic level, at the most basic level. And of course, we can't. There's no way we can detect what these intrinsic properties of the fundamental particles are. All we can know about them is how they interact. So there's this mysterious phenomenal level right down there at the bottom of the picture, which we can never observe, and whose presence makes no detectable differences to anything. So it's. I mean, the argument would be, yes, but it does explain how our consciousness fits into the world, and okay, but still, it's a rather costly solution to that problem. And again, that doesn't rule it out. It doesn't show that it's not a possible view, but I think it shows it's not an economical view. Okay, so those are options for people who think that phenomenal properties are not physical in the sense that they are properties described within that initial framework of the psychological, neural, and cellular, and so on. That they're not just brain properties. They're not physical in that sense of being actually being brain properties.
It's also, I'm just coming to think of, what about the Big Bang and these kind of theories? How does panpsychism fit into that? Is there any reason to have any? I mean, it's like, and what about evolution, right? How does evolution affect? It's like, it seems like the experiences are. You can't say the experience is some kind of reflection of an outside, right? Because then the way the body is the way the whole system is put together has been evolved, but there's nothing in panpsychism, as far as I understand, that says that you should be able to. It should combine in a way that is beneficial to you for your survival. How does that come about, right? So it seems to me like I'm as I said, I'm not an expert on this, right? I don't like to be, I don't want to be. But how about evolution? How does that fit in the picture? I just don't get it, right? But that's just a side note to this.
Either add-ons to it or a new level at the very base of the physical world. What about saying that, well, actually, phenomenal properties, they're real, they're not an illusion, as illusionists claim, but they are just ordinary physical properties of the brain, say. That having an experience of phenomenal blue is just for your brain to be in a certain state. Not for your brain to be in a certain state and there to be some correlated non-physical state, but just...
Okay, so he's trying to say to me that there is some blueness, but that's just because there's a consciousness just wanting to look at what is going on, like a tourist on a mountaintop saying, "Oh, that looks pretty, right? Oh, that's interesting, blue. Oh, that's a sound there. There's." It's sort of a bystander consciousness of some kind. You're just looking at this, high-level traffic of whatever, right? And that comes across as blue or the smell of roses or something like that. So that's what he's apparently thinking. I don't know. I'm trying to understand where he's coming from.
For your brain to be in that physical state, that's all phenomenal blueness is, a certain brain state. So this is a physicalist form of realism. Okay, so let's have a look at this and see why the illusionists reject this. Okay, so...
But Are you doing a case for illusionism now? It seems like you're still refuting other kinds of thinking. I'm not. I'm fucking confused about this mess. Oh. It better be a fucking good case when you get to it, right?
You may think the obvious way to go then is some form of physicalist realism. Realism about phenomenal properties because, well, isn't it obvious they exist? And physicalism because...
Just mind you, right? He's using the term exist, right? That's a central term in, ontological, I think it's called metaphysics, right? Stating what you mean by the term exist, because that is something that is sort of outside your experience or something like that, right? He hasn't come up with any kind of rigid, nothing, just even approaching a rigid definition of what he means by exist, and all sorts of other terms you're using, like true and so on, right? He's not rigid in any way here. He's just throwing fancy words at you, basically, right? Trying to groom you in a certain direction.
It avoids all the problems that I've just been discussing, all the problems of fitting phenomenal properties into the physical world. If they are just physical features, they are just features.
And also, I also get this strong notion, right? They're basically all communists, these academics, because academia is a parasite on a tax system. He might be in a private university or whatever, but they're all soaked in this system somehow or somewhere or another, right? They're all relying on each other and state protection and so on, right? And they have to be communist in order to be in that system. You can't be a free market person or a freedom-loving person or somebody who is not into taxation and be in a position like this, right? So it's sort of there are all sort of underlying stuff I can't get rid of when I see stuff like this, right? Show me a fucking free market philosopher, right? Somebody, I mean, the closest thing might be Bernardo Kastrup, actually, but he's also a raging communist, apparently, right? Christian coming, right? I don't know what, right? Woo-woo shit. Show me somebody who's free market and who can use his brain in a philosophical manner. Something along the lines I'm doing, right? Not saying I'm perfect or anything like that. But they're all hiding in their state-funded ivory towers, just presenting all sorts of bullshit in order to stay there, man, right? It's so ridiculous, man, right? While Rome is burning, they're sitting there talking about diet qualia and qualia zero, right? How funny, right? Making fun of Coca-Cola, right? Ooh. The imperialists, right? I'm not saying they're not imperialists, but it's this same old between the lines bullshit, right?
Of the brain, then there's no problem. This is, I guess, the majority.
I want to get this out also. And they can always sit there and virtue signal about Ukraine and Putin, Putty Hitler there, right? And be so, I'm so high level of, yes, I'm sitting here in my ivory tower, sucking on the tits of the poor people forced to pay taxes, right? And I can tell them about how virtuous about I'm supporting Ukraine, yes, and LGBT and climate change and all this. I'm such a good person, so you have to be forced to give me money.
But if you among philosophers of consciousness, but I don't think it's really a coherent option. I think when you look at it closely, it either leaves us with an explanatory gap or it collapses into illusionism. Let me try to explain why. The illustration here is...
So his philosophy arrives from a collapse. Okay, that is comforting. And I'm being sarcastic, obviously, right?
The piece of artwork by Art Ambassadin, which he did for me in Greenland in 2014, and it refers to a 2012 paper of mine in which I introduced some concepts for different kinds of qualia. This is the crucial question to ask about phenomenal realism. What exactly are we being realist about? We've been using these words, phenomenal properties, phenomenal consciousness, phenomenality, qualia, what it is likeness, and so on. But what do these really come down to? And this is in itself an extreme.
So you have been using these terms for a couple of hours, if not more, right? And now you're going into trying to talk about what do we really mean when we use these terms? Oh, man. Oh, man. Right. Oh, man. He's fucking pissing me in my face, right? What do I really mean by realism or, whatever? Why didn't you start here then, right? I mean, this idiot, he's fucking annoying, right? Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. I've been getting all... Oh,
Difficult question. But here are a couple of distinctions that I introduced in this paper using this soft drink metaphor. Classic qualia. The classic qualia are qualia as Dennett introduced them in his 1988 paper. Introspectable properties of experience that are intrinsic, they're not functionally, can't be characterized in functional terms, they're ineffable, you can't describe what they're like in themselves, they're subjective, they're completely private, and there's another feature that Dennett adds, which I haven't mentioned there, which is that they're directly apprehensible, you know them immediately without any kind of intervening process of inference or representation, I guess. And then we can say that strong realism about phenomenality is the view that classic qualia exist, that experiences really do have those properties. And if you take that view, then it's quite hard to be a physicalist, because it's hard to see how physical properties, the sort of properties that can be investigated by third-person science, could be ineffable and intrinsic and subjective in that way. I mean, if they're subjective, if they're completely private, then there's no way that third-person science could investigate them. So it seems that a physicalist can't be a realist about classic qualia. Now, here's another notion, which is the, if you like, the antithesis of classic qualia. It's zero qualia, not really any qualia at all. The properties of, by this I mean that this is a term I coined, the properties of experiences that dispose us to judge that they have introspectable qualitative properties that are intrinsic, ineffable, and subjective. So really, to say that an experience has zero qualia is to say that there's something about it that disposes us to judge that it has classic qualia. And of course, illusionists think that experiences have zero qualia. They think we're disposed to judge that our experiences have qualia. That's the illusion. And so there must be some features about them that dispose us to do that. So illusionism, strong illusionism, I'll explain why I say strong there, is the view that only zero qualia exists, no classic qualia at all. Now, physicalist realists, they have to reject classic qualia, as I just explained, but they don't want to say that there's nothing more than zero qualia. They want to be realists, and zero qualia are not really qualia. And so here's a quotation from Michael Tye, first of all, which expresses his rejection of classic qualia. He says, there is a use of the term qualia under which qualia are intrinsic, introspectively accessible, non-representational qualities of experience. In my view, there are no qualia conceived of in this way. They are a philosophical myth. So he agrees with Dennett in rejecting those. But he doesn't agree with Dennett in rejecting qualia and phenomenal properties outright. He goes on.
I mean, I don't like this. So then jumping directly into somebody else's, it's like he's fanboying other philosophers in order to have good arguments. It's like he's just
Michael Tye, first of all, which
I'd have to rewind this a bit to get to this point here.
Yeah.
This list here, which is supposedly
disposes to do
all the arguments there is. Sorry for that. This I just don't. It's just a cumbersome way he has presented this, right? Realism about what? So it's also a stupid bullet points, right? Realism about what should be some kind of headline, right? Then the classic qualia, strong realism, zero qualia, and strong illusionism. Now, when I as I heard this, I don't think I understand what is supposed to be here, right? Introspectable, qualitative properties of experience. But what is the difference between experience and properties of experience? What does it mean that these properties are intrinsic, ineffable, or subjective? It's like this the same approach that a guy like Stefan Molyneux has, right? He talks about all sorts of weird history stuff for a couple of pages, and then he slams some sentence with 10 different ideas and terms that needs to be defined somehow in order for me to understand what the hell we're talking about, right? What does it mean to introspect? What is qualitative? What is a property? What is an experience? What does it mean that it is and it is intrinsic? What is ineffable and subjective, right? I'm not saying I don't have an idea what he might mean, but that doesn't mean that he means the same that I mean, right? These terms have to be defined in order for us to understand what you mean, so we can check whether or not you're bullshitting us, right? Strong real classic qualia exist. What do you mean by qualia exist? Qualia is not existence. Well, what am I? Zero qualia. The properties of experience that dispose us to judge that experiences have introspective qualities. The zero, is it a part of qualia? The properties of experience. So classic qualia is introspective or qualitative properties of experiences. The properties of experience that dispose us to judge that experience. But so in order for us to introspect about the properties of these experiences, we have to have some zero qualia to introspect about. Oh man, right? Ah, fuck off you, man, right? Only zero qualia exist. What does it mean to exist? I'm going to fucking kill myself, man, right? Shoot somebody. No, I'm not. Relax. It's like he's basically pissing you in the face, right? This convoluted bullshit is not going to fly any day soon, right? What the hell is this, man, right? Nobody, even trained philosophers who have been doing some kind of philosophy for years, myself included, but other people who might be prone to delving into this, how can they possibly understand what he means by this, right? And he doesn't do any kind of explanation. He just reads aloud and then quickly jumps into some quotations
here's a quotation from Michael
from
Twyford.
some people. Okay, I know about the James Chalmers there, right? What is it, David Chalmers? But I don't have a big. He's not a big person in my book, David Chalmers, right? He's one of those. Let me spend a lot of time on a problem that can't be solved, pretending that it might be solved, so I can spend the rest of my days discussing this problem that can't be solved, right? And write a lot of books, get on telly, and whatever, right? Bullshit. Michael Ty says there is a use of the term qualia, under which qualia are intrinsic, introspectively accessible, non-representational qualities of experience. What's the difference between a qualia and an experience? Isn't it the same, right? You don't have a quality of an experience. You have qualia, which is that which you have. That's all you have. Qualia is not an aspect of an experience. It is the experience, right? There is nothing else but the qualia. You can't extract some kind of experience and then have experience and qualia over here, right? And say we don't need this qualia because we have the experience. No, you are splitting an atom. You can't split, right? It's qualia and it's qualia, nothing more, right? And it's inexplicable. Because it's a foundation, right? Oh, man.
First of all, which expresses his rejection of classic qualia. He says, there is a use of the term qualia under which qualia are intrinsic, introspectively accessible, non-representational qualities of experience. In my view, there are no qualia conceived of in this way. They are a philosophical myth. So he agrees with Dennett in rejecting those. But he doesn't agree with Dennett in rejecting qualia and phenomenal properties outright. He goes on, or actually this is in the preceding sentence, philosophers often use the term qualia to refer to the introspectively accessible properties of experience that characterize what it is like.
No, qualia are not properties. Qualia is the thing. There is nothing but qualia. What you might be confused about are the concepts or the cognitions within the qualia, right? But they come after you are having the qualia. You are not experiencing elephant without having at least, I would say, vision, right? You can't be blind and then you can experience the sound of an elephant, but you do not have the concept of elephant in the same way that a visual person has, right? So they are derived from these qualia, right? Otherwise, you're saying elephants is traveling through your eyes or something. That is even more ridiculous, right? So they have to be extracted from the qualia. Otherwise, why the hell would you have the qualia? It would be eliminated through evolution, right? And you would just have elephant and no qualia. So it's ridiculous. The amount of tangled abstractions these philosophers can, move themselves into. It's ridiculous. That page over here, the previous one was, especially nasty, right? Let me see if I can get this one. I mean, this convoluted shit is like, I'm not even going to try to deconstruct it because I'm going to fucking lose my mind, right? And my head is going to explode in this shit, right? And because they already have some ideas of these words and what they entail, and being able to place these words within this convoluted text justifies the meaning of the words because they can use the term. So apparently it becomes correct because I could use the term in this context and I know what the meaning of this term is, so I'm justified. This kind of linguistic manipulation that is disconnected from anything you can experience, apparently, right? Always be careful with philosophers who want to take you away from your immediate experiences, right? Always, in my opinion. I'm just, it's my warning. Do what you like, right? But it's like most of my day goes with using my experiences, using my qualia, right? I'm using it right now to record this. I'm making sounds, I'm receiving vision, I'm, whatever shapes and so on. Eating food, tasting food, looking at the world, listening to music, doing my work, looking at my computer. I'm using my fucking qualia all the time, right? Be careful with these people. They are fucking dangerous.
They want to be realists, and zero qualia, this zero to the introspectively accessible properties of experience that characterize what it is like to have them. In this standard broad sense of the term, it's very difficult to deny that there are qualia. So he wants to say that there are properties that make it like something for us to there are properties of experience that make it like something for us to have those experiences. They're not these...
Why is it necessary unless you want to you want to split qualia into two parts so you both can deny qualia and keep qualia, right? This eating your cake and having your cake and eat it too, or however it's put, having cake and eat it too, right? So you want qualia, you need it because you need to look for your pickle jar, right? But you want to refute it, so you're saying, okay, there's qualia and then what it's like to have the qualia, right? So the qualia is not important, but the what it's like is what we are using. So we can sort of both reject and use qualia at the same time, right? I mean, it's like, get the fuck out of my face, right? And also, what it's like to experience red has no influence whether or not I should, eat a mailman, right? How could it possibly be important what it's like to experience the color of a mailman, right? Can I eat him or her, right? That's what we want to know or understand. Or what the hell do I do with this dude, right? And how do I know if it's correct? I don't care about the fucking qualia in the end. I know I need the qualia in order to justify that there actually is a mailman, right? But when I've done that, what I'm interested in is the mailman and what the hell to do with it, right? So the qualia or what its likeness, who gives a fuck really, right? So this elaborate jumping through all sorts of weird hoops that sounds more like strawman arguments, right? To me, or red herrings of some kind, than actual arguments. When the notorious one I showed before with these convoluted, sentences that sort of grab each other and you lose contact with what the hell you're talking about. If this is the core kind of argument in this case, lecture series or case for illusionism, I basically don't give a fuck, right? I would rather be without it, right? Because it's only going to confuse me more about, I don't feel confused about my philosophy, but it's not going to help me with anything, right? It's only going to solidify my thinking even more, right? Because this stupid shit is not going to fly for me.
Heavy-duty classic qualia, but they are still more, I think he would say, than mere dispositions to judge that our experiences have qualia of some kind. And here's another quote from quotation from Peter Carruthers. Many philosophers use the term qualia liberally to refer to those properties of mental states, whatever they may be, in virtue of which the states in question are phenomenally conscious. On this usage, qualia, subjective feel, and what it is likeness are all just notational variants of one another. And on this usage, it is beyond dispute that there are such things as qualia. Now again, and kind of accompanies that by a statement rejecting qualia in the classic sense as intrinsic and ineffable and non-representational and so on. So what, and these are just two samples. I think this is a very common move in the philosophy of consciousness over the last 20 years or so, is to say, well, okay, there aren't qualia in that strong classic sense, but there certainly are qualia in some weaker sense. So what they're introducing is what I've suggested I'm suggesting that they've introduced this notion of diet qualia, a sort of watered down version of qualia that is still stronger than zero qualia. Diet qualia in this sense are just the phenomenal characters of experience, the subjective feels, the what it is likenesses, and it seems that these things are real even if the heavy duty ineffable intrinsic non-representational, non-functional qualia are not. And so then...
But you are saying subjective feel, what is his likeness? Diet qualia. So what is the difference? Well, why do you need to add the term subjective? I'm saying that you're adding the term subjective to the qualia, right? Why? What is difference between qualia and subjective qualia? There are only subjective qualia. It is intrinsically subjective because there has to be some subject like you or me to have those qualia. I can only say I have qualia. You telling me you have qualia doesn't mean I know you have qualia, right? So I have qualia. They are intrinsically subjective. I'm a subject. I'm an object, but the subject is me. The object is something that is external to me, right? And you could say in a way my body is external to my mind, so my body is an object. But my experiences, my qualia are subjective because they are within the subject, which is me, right? So there is no objective likeness, what it is like, or qualia. There are no qualia out there. They are in your fucking mind, man. Oh, man. You know, it's also this, I'm, hesitant to say that he's ever going to listen through my deconstructions here, right? I wouldn't mind if he did, right? But I'm in the camp now where I'm saying this is a lost cause, man, right? I have done my deconstructions and then I'm leaving this behind because it is too far gone to attempt to redirect this dude and his friends into something that is coherent, right? This is fucking ridiculous, right? He keeps throwing words at it, right? As if it's sort of diet qualia and what the... oh, man, right? And we are still not even halfway through the case. 52.39 minutes, right? And it goes on and on and on and on. Oh, has he presented the case yet? I don't know. I'm confused, right? I don't know. Will I know when the case arrives or what? I don't know, man. It's like, oh, man. It's a mystery, right? Okay, we are reaching the 1 hour mark, and I will have to say this is the end of this part. Please share, like, and subscribe. Give me some, please maybe share and, like and subscribe, of course, but share and help me get some exposure, right? And it wouldn't be the worst thing to share this, maybe the whole playlist, but, and you can find it in the playlists of mine somewhere on YouTube here, right? And help me get this out on the field. And leave a comment, share, like, and subscribe, as I say. And, consider joining the Discord board, link in description. Otherwise, have a nice day. See you next time.